Thank you.
Blog Talk Radio.
Live from Washington, D.C., it's Quintessential Listening, Poetry Online Radio. Now, here's your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram.
Good evening and welcome to the program. Again, my name is Michael Anthony Ingram. Tonight, my very special guest is Nicole Verrone. Nicole is the author of the new book of poetry, Nest of Stars, from Atmosphere Press. Nicole, how are you tonight?
I'm so good. How are you this evening?
I'm quite well. Let's begin this journey together. All right?
Okay.
All right. Nicole, what is poetry?
So I've given a lot of thought to this, especially during my time teaching. And the longer that I observe great poets, I feel like the theme arises that, a life of a poet typically involves some initial ache or some brokenness. And even though no one's really free from that, poetry seems to be that rope that you climb out of this depth that you're forced into potentially. Art is like that. It's messy. It's creating an order from chaos. And so that's a bit of what poetry is to me. Poetry is, I've thought in the past week long about this, and I was telling a friend of mine, I think that poetry is like a sister that I always needed. It's like that internal language that puts words and wordplay into the inexpressible feelings. It's a way to express the things that are otherwise unable to be expressed easily.
Oh, wow, very nice. I've never heard it described as a sister that I've always needed. That is so nice. Why? Let's look at it from a different vantage point. What makes it important for us? Why do we do what we do?
So what makes it important to me is I wrote about this mistake that we can make in life, where we are so busy that we and it's very cliche, but there's so much truth in it, where if we are still, if we practice that art of stillness, there's so much to be seen. And I have found that in silence, if you give silence long, if you give yourself enough time and space in silence, that you'll start hearing this beautiful rhythm of life underneath all of the babble, all of the surface of things. And poetry is important because it calls you to a deeper place. And I've described it before as the relationship between the spirit and the flesh, right? It's those words that we use to describe and make sense of ache, of despair, and inversely of the hope and love that's present. But it's that relationship, it's that conversation between our flesh and our spirit.
Oh, wow, very nice. Wow, I'm already stunned. Thank you so much for sharing just that little piece. I mean, it really sets the stage for what we plan to go tonight. Very, very nice. Now, let's talk about Nest of Stars. What inspired you to write the book?
So I would say that I never set out to write the book. From a personal perspective, I had children at a very young age. I had them as stepping stones. They were all 2 years apart, and I was 23 when I had my first daughter, and I have 4 daughters total. And when the third moved out and went away to school, I finally had what felt like an empty nest. And I knew myself well enough to know that if I gave myself over to the craft of writing, that I wouldn't be the mother that I wanted to be. And it was important for me to give them everything they needed in the way of nurture and attention. And I put everything that was kind of, and I, we'll talk about this later, I'm sure, the conflict between the writer's voice and the voice that we use to communicate with the people in our space. But I knew myself well enough to know that if I were going to be writing, that I would have to hide away. I have to write in solitude, and I write marathon style. So I can't just give myself to little pieces of it. So once my house was empty, pre-COVID actually, I had a flood of creativity that I had the time and space finally to give attention to. And I was writing daily, and I was writing a lot, and I was feeling really happy about the work that I was doing. And I was at the place in my life where I felt confident enough to stand up for taking that time to devote to those things that I'd put to the side for so long. And then, so once I realized that I had quite a collection assimilated, I submitted just a collection to the New Yorker and got picked up by Atmosphere Press, which was what has ended up being like just the introduction to lots of friends that I had been missing in my life for so long.
All right, very nice. Now, what was, as you think about your background in history, was an early experience where you learned that poetic language had power?
Oh, well, my first introduction to poetry happened when I was pretty young. I wrote about this in my bio, but my mother's youngest brother was taken tragically in a car accident, and he was a poet. And so I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' farm, and his poetry was hanging in his bedroom, and I studied it. I was fascinated by the verse, and because I spent so much time there, and I spent so much time outside. I feel like the combination of those two things, of reading his verse and then taking my little bare feet outside on the farm and just listening to the cadence of the world, right? Yes. I believe that's where I was introduced to poetry. I think that there's poetry threaded all through all of the rhythms of the universe, and I couldn't help but be set by all of those rhythms and the bird song and the cows and the way that the trees spoke when everything else was quiet. There was nothing there but dust and flowers and gardens and everything natural. There wasn't any interruption, and I began to, I think, be tuned by that.
Very nice.
It was obviously unintentional, but it's hard to think of another thing that would have happened because, until I was maybe in sixth grade, I really had no other poetry that was introduced to me, I would say.
All right. Well, it's that time. Please share a poem.
Okay, I would love to. I thought about the order to share these in, and if I step back for a moment, I would say that injury is the first sort of thing that brings you to the point of needing to say something deep, right? Whether it's a time of loss or a time of pain, and usually those are the moments where we're still. And so I wrote this piece called Scar that I want to share with you first, and then we can chat about it. This is called Scar. Severity of a severed nerve. Entrance through 3 levels of skin security. Ultimate, instant intensity. Applied pressure intended to kill flow. Bath plug, cork snug, stops blood, then slowly strangles feeling. Pain creates memory, notching an end when the same sting suspends the clock. Surgical gauze, pressure blankets, explicative cope rope. Ultimate exit of the raised, broken offering and surrender. And that's the end. Thank you.
Tell me more about Scar.
So Scar was prompted by an actual injury where I had quite the injury to my thumb, and I ended up just having to hold it in the air for several hours, and then I drove myself to the ER and had it all stitched up. And at the ER, the PA offered me a rag to bite on. It was quite a scene, and I was reflecting on that the next day. This was during that time where I was having my flood of writing, and I thought about the way in which there are all these layers, right? There's all these layers of skin, first of all, that protect what's precious inside. And when that's broken, there's pain that comes, and this ends up happening on so many levels. It felt very spiritual to me. When there's brokenness, there's a pain that's exposed, right? And in spite of all of the means of securing oneself and of putting up these borders and having this thick skin, there's still a memory that's attached to that time where the clock stops. Ultimately, when something is ended, the clock stops, and nothing is the same after that. And so the scar is like a braided patch over something that was difficult. And it's the end of this piece just says it's the ultimate exit of a raised, broken offering and surrender, where you realize that the smooth skin of innocence will never be the same. But also in surrendering to that, there's a strength underneath. So that's what Scar sort of touches on a bit for me. It's funny though, when I wrote this, it was kind of the moment was fairly humorous, because I was a little bit delirious driving myself to the ER, and I had to drive home with my thumb up because I needed to keep the blood flow down, and I had my thumb up in the window, just giving everyone I was driving by the thumbs up. So so there was a mixture of humor, but that was the story of this piece, though. I'm tortured by thinking over and over about things, and
tell me more. Tell me more.
What I mean is that I became a deep thinker, not because I wanted to become someone who thought through everything, but it would be much simpler to be lighthearted all of the time. But this calling to be a poet and to overthink things and to see into the life of things is, can be tedious. So I'm thankful for the humor that also I'm able to balance those things out with. It allows me to keep going without burrowing too deep into, into the dark truth of things, right?
Oh, yes, I like that. Well, let me ask this question. Do you think, and your work is very emotional, I won't say this, I don't mean it in a negative way, but there's a lot of emotion in your work. Mm-hmm. Do you think that someone can be called a poet if they don't feel strong emotions?
Oh, well, it's interesting that you asked that. I was thinking earlier, and I was thinking about how you rarely ever meet a poet that says, my life's been pretty easy and balanced and uneventful, right? I just enjoy this mode of expression. This is just the way that I choose to write. Usually when I meet a poet or someone who has an affinity for poetry, my first question is, what happened to you? What did you have to climb out of? What was it that you needed to? What was it that pressed you into the depths? And how are you now? So I it's hard to speak on behalf of other poets, but that's just what I've observed. There usually is something that calls you to a depth, and whether that's a gift or a curse, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It just is.
Oh, wow. Well, share another poem.
Okay. I would be glad to. This particular piece is called Equation, and if I, we're stepping back out, if I were giving you an order to this, and so if we talked about injury first, then I would say that this is the observational standpoint of who I am. Like, I've had the injury, right? I've survived it. I have a little bit of strength, and now this is an observation, and I used the play on. I was just helping my daughter with equations, and I thought long and hard about what equations are, and I think that they're applicable also to. I think they're applicable to the difficulties of situations. So that was the motivation for this, and she happens to be in middle school, so there's all sorts of surrounding difficulties. But this is called Equation. The answer cannot be found without first having a problem. The solution is greater than the problem. The quandary when a negative is introduced to any equation requires balance. Turn on the light, ignore other problems, subtract and reevaluate, identify the positive. When no value is assigned and negative equations cause coordinates to subtract from a linear infinite trend towards a solution, or when zero is left on the line, the addition of positive factors multiplied to cross infinite lines from the center perpendicular to the diameter of a perfect sphere, positive proofs produce infinite and absolute. And that's it. That's Equation, Michael.
You are a deep thinker. You are a deep thinker. Equations. Please share another poem.
Okay. Let's see. Let's. I would like to share. Let's share. Heron, you and I are both from the South, right?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we are both from the South, and so I spent some time at the shore, and I was thinking about the just the juxtaposition of this beautiful heron bird in the mud, right? She was so exquisite and her feet were just planted in this muddy mire of a marsh in the Southland here. So this is called Heron. Southern marsh fenced in cattails is governed by the boa and bodice of a blue heron whose debutante posture defies the mud-battered glue on her sticky shoes. Mosquitoes prey and snip like neon zip signs. Soon as you turn to sin, live oaks host ghosts in a haunted historical wind. Spanish moss itches, and unrest is under the rest of our somatic symptoms. 100 years, cholera, longing, echo blue aligned malaise. You cannot dive or die, heron bird. The creek is shallow as a weather word. Nothing breathes that easy leaves. Solitude isolates, then inhales another disease, viral as torpedo heat. Neither equator nor pole begin or end the circled world, and without flight, we would rather freeze. It's cold to know, it burns to believe. Assuredness, Ginger's heron feet, infinite as these moments feel, deceptive and fleeting as a southern marsh breeze. And that's Heron.
We've had scars. We've had herons. We've had equations. How does a poem begin for you? With an idea, a form, or an image?
So I would say that my emotions and ideas play this mental tag, right? They're sort of woven into each other. My emotions sort of form ideas, and then these ideas, look strong, and then emotion steps in. But typically, my poems begin when I have this liberty and space to be alone. It's for me, my life is so full, and I have to sort of carve out time so that I can listen. And I would say that it happens in a variety of ways. Sometimes it's an image. Sometimes it's something that I pass while I'm driving, a row of pine trees. Sometimes it's sitting. I wrote a piece called "Hymn" that I'll share with you next. I wrote that after sitting with my brothers by a campfire. It was a moment where everything felt like you were witnessing like the honey of life, like the sweetest parts of life. And it's those moments that I don't have to remember them by putting them down in a note. They become part of who I am. They become imprinted in my disposition, and when I respond to them, when I capture them, it's the same as a sketch for me. It's like having this word art that surrounds this particular either instant in my memory, whether it was a correspondence that I had that was impactful, or if it was something that I was reading that I had to respond to it because it moved me in such a way. So it begins with an idea. Oftentimes, like the poem I shared called "Equation" began with an idea. I sort of let my mind think about what an equation was, and all the things that are added to it. We have things added to our situations, and we have things taken away, and when it's all said and done, then we have this, we have absolute truth at the end of it, and or maybe we have absolute darkness at the end of it. Maybe everything is, maybe sometimes it is just a zero left on the line. But that began with an idea. The image sometimes is motivation. I love art, and I need it, and I'm moved by it. And I also love music, and I need music, and I'm moved by it. And there's rarely a moment in my space, whether it be in the car or in my home, when music isn't playing. And I feel like poetry is that music of words. And if someone would let me, I would speak in poetry to them all the time. But I happen to just, not live with, I don't live with poets. I don't live with, I live with scientists. And so that, you know how it goes.
Well, your speaking voice is so clear. It's lyrical in a sense. What is the relationship? That is the question. What is the relationship between your speaking voice and your written voice?
So my speaking voice is it's oftentimes very nurturing. I take care of people. I am, I'm a nurturer, and I find it very easy to love, and my heart is pretty soft. My writing voice, I would say, is the patient one of the two. And it's always, even after all of that time, when I set it aside so that I could raise my children, when I had a moment for it again, it was there, and it had not grown any weaker. It was there waiting. It was there just waiting for me to be available. And so that's the relationship between my speaking voice and my written voice. But it's funny. My thoughts are sort of 19th century language, and I have to. I joke about this, but
give me an example.
No, I can't do that. I can't do that without several glasses of wine, maybe. But I go about my daily life, and I always am writing. I always am writing in my mind, whether I'm begrudgingly doing the dishes or in my flower garden. And when I'm working in my flowers, it's the worst, time to have like a read of my mind, because maybe not the worst time. It depends on who is having to listen to me. But so they talk, and I'm a Gemini, so I have this twin thing too. So yes, they're both present. I would say they're both present in full force. But the writer's voice is very kind and very patient, and I do, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for it.
All great writers have great writing influences. Who are some of your influences, and what makes them great in your eyes?
That is one of the most difficult, unless we could spend several hours on this. But I would say that the first time that I heard any poetry recitation was Robert Frost's Fire and Ice, and I do love the cadence of Frost. There are places in my memory that are reserved for Frost, for birches, and for stopping by the woods, and Fire and Ice, and so many pieces of Frost that I was introduced, as a sixth grader, as a young language arts student. And then I think the next writer that was impactful to me as a student was I had a fantastic American literature instructor, and so I learned all of the transcendentalists, and fell in love with all of them, and fell in love with that movement. But the most impactful thing that happened that particular year in American literature was when I first heard Maya Angelou, and I named my second daughter after her. I watched her in a video recite "Still I Rise," and I can still pull up the thrill of my pulse racing to hear and to watch her face and to watch the steady gaze that she delivered, that inner strength, and talked about the diamonds at the meeting of her thighs. And I was never the same. I was never the same after hearing her. In a more let's see. I can't let this question pass without mentioning Bob Dylan, who is my favorite vocalist, and he is one of my favorite poets, and I would say he is my favorite preacher of all time. If I ever were to say that I had a favorite pastor, I would say that he shepherds my soul. This Dylan man. I love his just trumpet for social justice. Idiot Wind, With God on Our Side, The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll, Chimes of Freedom. I just, I love this man's work. And then there's, they're the classics. They're all of the classics. Tennyson and the lyricism of Tennyson and The Lady of Shalott. There are lines that I could just, stream out from Tennyson that just changed who I was. And then I would say Mary Oliver, the way that Mary Oliver describes that you don't have to walk on your knees 100 miles through the desert repenting. You just have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. When I read that line, I just wanted to weep. I wanted to throw my arms around her knees. I wanted to dance. She's a huge influence. And then there are others. I love Cormac McCarthy. They're not all poets. I studied poetry. I studied poetry in school, and I still read some poetry. Mostly, I memorized the things that I needed to memorize, and they stuck to me, and I didn't have to put a lot of effort into memorizing it. I just loved it like I love songs, so I have these little pieces that just became who I was. But oh my gosh! But even the poetry and the lyricism of Willa Cather and there are Herman Melville. There's so many beautiful quotes throughout Moby Dick that once I came across them, I was sad that I had waited so long to be on that ship with the captain.
Beautiful.
Right?
Beautiful.
So
beautiful.
So anyway, yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a brief break, and we'll be right back.
That sounds good. Thank you.
I'm here with Nicole Verrone. Her new book of poetry, Nest of Stars, is available on Amazon as well as Barnes & Noble and other outlets. It's from Atmosphere Press. Nicole, please share another poem.
Okay, Michael. I thought the next piece I should share is a bit of music, since you shared music with us. This is called Frozen Jazz. Murano glass tour crashed sad with a sound pitch-perfect rat-a-tat tune like Poe's swanky catbird. It was pushed, he said, it swang like a swing dance dive man, then burst into heartache, screaming like a cymbal flash, bits and splinters lashed. What a sick drumstick hit, just like that, turquoise eyeglass. Rushed to the bleed like a savior to save the stage lights on incomplete jazz. Want to watch that shipwreck sink me? A little front page news, titanical confusion, haywire, live wire, gravitational blues. Think of all that bass line score, all that hi-hat encore, all the jazz froze when morning hit it hard. She pulled the strings, tied the pieces to a bathtub ring. Paper-thin Undertaker man, soot-eyed chimney sweep band slipped up to the tracks, mopped waves to the can. Last call, SOS address, elbow grease and close-up. Throw a rope, the tour is done. The jazz all froze when the tiles explode. And that was Frozen Jazz.
Frozen jazz. You know, some poets claim that a poem is like a living creature. Once it's out there, there's not much you can do to correct or improve it, while others edit meticulously, not leaving much from the original draft form. What is your take on it?
What is my take on changing poetry from the original form in the way of editing, you mean?
Yes.
Oh my God. Okay, so I would say that it's the same way that I sketch. I set out to sketch this one particular, shape. Like this morning I was trying to draw a picture of a calf that I'd passed in a pasture not too long ago, and I wrecked it. I have no artistic instruction, and so I have enough creativity to make it into something different, right? And so anything that I ever, like this Frozen Jazz piece, I decided to write it because I honestly had a piece of Murano glass break on my back patio, and I was sad about it, but it had a cool noise when it hit the concrete, and I liked how it sounded, and I saved the pieces because they were this beautiful blue color, and I took those pieces, and at the time I was on this kick of making mobiles, and I made a mobile that actually does hang above my bathtub, and it's all of these beautiful pieces of Murano glass, and that's what Frozen Jazz is about. Like, it was singing, and then everything came to an abrupt end. So yes, editing, editing is everything. I could never share a piece that hadn't been combed, that hadn't been didn't have its shoes put on, that I couldn't share a piece that just came right out of the womb without being dressed in some kind of beauty. Nothing usually is ready to be introduced right when it's born. It needs a little time, and that's what editing is for me. So yeah, I have to change it. There are lines sometimes that I hear in my mind that I wouldn't touch, and they end up being maybe the title or a nucleus of sorts, but very, very rarely does anything look even remotely the way that it did when it first, scratched over some white surface, right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. I'm still thinking about the fact that the piece fell and the sounds that you made something out of nothing in a sense, and I like that. I like that a lot.
I did. I probably torture everyone around me. I happen to. I happen to live with a lot of people that like things in order, and I swim upstream against that, and I participate to keep everyone happy, but I'm sort of a mess. I sort of break things sometimes. So.
Well, my question will be to you then. I think I can tell that writing energizes you? It sounds as if it does. So my question is whether writing energizes or exhausts you, because I'm sensing that you're teetering on that line, whether it's exhaustion or energy. I don't know. I could be wrong, so correct me.
No. It's a beautifully wonderful question. It's a wonderful question, and I would say that, you know, the pieces that I feel really proud of are ones that started out as like this internal struggle. And typically once I sense that internal struggle, I've gotten better, and I've become quicker at identifying it. But typically I will just, muse on that for days. And then once I can't handle it any longer and have no answers for it, I'll sit down with it and I'll write and I will address it and I will tame it with my words. I will, take this emotion that's kind of trying to mess with my head, and I'll tame it by putting it into a beautiful verse and looking at it and reframing it in a different way, so that, I can take control over the space of my thoughts. So in that way, it can be exhausting while it's in the process, while it's, while I'm shaving away the darkness, while I'm, fighting off the darkness of it. And then once it's just like this pure light form, then I'm always proud of it, and it always energizes me. I never feel happier than when I complete a poem or I complete a sketch, or I feel like I have then, participated in creation, and I've set order to chaos, and I've, participated in this beautiful thing that I was made to do, and that is to take, or to just to be a vessel and to invite, this arrangement into something that otherwise had no form.
Well, let me ask this question. So much has happened in our world, or is happening in our world. Pandemic, you name it, we're going through it. What do you view as being the role of a poet in modern-day society?
So, I would say that it goes back to that. You rarely ever meet a poet who just says, this is the method of communication I've chosen. Usually a poet has been broken. And I would say that the broken among us are the ones that end up having the most compassion, unless, they turn very cynical. But I would say that is the breeding ground for compassion, right? I mean, I've been, I've been forgiven for so much. So I rarely ever meet someone who has this, blunder that I never feel as if I have a place to criticize. And so I think the compassion and love that can be transferred through verse it's an avenue of hope through the darkness. And the only problem that we have is the ability to gain attention long enough from all of the forlorn faces, to have them to be still enough and to give attention enough to things that are deep and to things that are true and to things that are beautiful. And I think art and music and poetry specifically can be so transformational to offer hope back to the hopeless.
Wow.
But it can't be done in a way. Thank you. It can't be communicated in a way that's critical, though. I just, I feel so strongly about that. I hate the us versus them mindset. I just feel like that is just such a tragic perspective, and it's not one that has any compassion wound together in it.
Wow. Do you think that you were meant to be a poet?
Yes.
Tell me more. I kind of figured you would, but tell me more. Tell me
more. I know I was meant to be a poet. It's one of the things. It's one of the outlets and avenues that has traveled with me for as long as I can remember. When I am with my work, I am at peace. I think that I can do many other things. I could do a number of other things, but when I think about the second part of my life, right? When I think about, getting this part of my life behind me, where I've done this raising of beautiful children, I do see myself writing continually until the very end, and that gives me just this wild thrill, and that's the litmus test for me. When my pulse starts racing, when I consider myself, seated and writing, and there are a million ideas I have that wait for me. I really just, I sort of am just waiting, and I'm so looking forward to that. In fact, I've shared that, when people ask, when, we go around the table or whatever situation it is, when, if you could do anything, my dream is to just travel the perimeter of the world and write a poetic map of the universe, just sailing and watching and writing, and just a description of all of the places that I haven't seen yet. That's what I'm living for.
Well, it's funny. My questions are getting in the way of your sharing your wonderful, wonderful work. Please share another poem.
Oh, God, okay. And I hope that I'm staying true to, I hope that I'm even answering your questions, Michael.
Yes, you are.
I'm
thoroughly enjoying our talk.
I'm so glad. I've been waiting to speak poetry. I don't get to do this on a very regular basis, and it's just joy to me, so thank you. I'm going to read this piece called Hen. This is, my brother is not a fan of poetry, which is fine, but he still inspires me. So this piece happened after a night of sitting with him by the fire, and he literally reached up into the tree where one of his hens was already roosting, and got her down for me so I could hold it, because he knew that it would just make me so happy. So this is called Hen. The feather-dust hen paces and pecks at her pie in the sky, crimping crust with forked feet. Knuckles of bow bone, a sleight of hand, mind you, entitled Morning and Evening, One Ordinary Day, an illegible chicken scratch. In the rich, candied landscape of deciduous delicacies, his hardware store hen clucks content as an imperial child. Philosophers prescribe walk in simplicity 25 miles or so for proper contented rest by close of day, as effective as being held or holding, my experimental philosophies convey. A thrill oil teems under wing. She snuffs the hen house, ignores the dangerous could-be wolves, and at dusk burrows in a roost, gargling into a fermented coo. He could reach and eased her down for me. His own wingspan, broad, expansive hands know the coaxing of her grip. I settle and let her nest in my arms, exquisitely dressed in a nightgown of blush eyelash ruching. Rooting in the bend, I am her limb, In the wood where fire reigns, the thrill of warm, fragile care is like the ascent into a split oak, fragile enough to die, or brave enough on chilly tips of October to hide my bones in the crook of your limb. And that's him, Michael.
Oh, wow. Wow. You know, the cover of your book is quite breathtaking. Tell us about the process for coming up with the cover of the book.
Okay, so the process of coming up with the cover was asking my friend Sarah if I could use a piece of her artwork, and this actually is a work of my friend Sarah's, and she has been a friend of mine for a long time, maybe nearly 20 years, and we've sort of grown up together. And this was a gift that she gifted me with, this beautiful offering of a cover for her.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Again, it's breathtaking. I really, really like it. I really do, and it sets the tone for what's to come, I believe. So I commend you and your friend. You make a great pairing. A great pairing. Now, what surprised you most from writing the book?
What surprised me the most?
Yes.
What surprised me the most was the amount and just the volume of work that had, that was just flowing out over a 6-month process. I was surprised by the variance of topics. I was surprised by my ability to be disciplined. I'm not, I have a discipline for a few things, like drinking coffee. I'm very disciplined in, and having happy hour. I'm fairly disciplined in happy hour, but other disciplines have always been a struggle. Other disciplines have always been a struggle to me. And this when I put the book together, I've developed a discipline of writing and editing and wrapping up a work, in a particular time frame. And I sort of set those parameters for myself, and I found that with quiet and with time, it was it surprised me. That's what surprised me the most, was my ability to find a discipline for this particular art form. I've never had it before. I think.
No, please continue.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, so for instance, when I was a college student and I usually wrote out of like this, despair or aggravation or hurt. And so once I found myself in a happier place, the writing wasn't, so that I could survive anymore. It was just, it became an art form. And because I wrote so often through college and those years, I had the exposure to great work, and I had practiced a bit of the editing process. And so, but this time I wasn't really writing out of sadness. I was writing out of joy.
Oh, wow. That is so nice to hear. You're writing out of joy. That touched me.
I'm so glad.
Yes. If you had to convince a friend or a colleague to read your book, what would you tell them? I'm a terrible salesperson. I wouldn't want to convince anyone who didn't want to read it. I haven't, I try to be polite. Then they were like,
but I will answer your question nevertheless. Okay. So I would say the way that I would describe it would be just, it's just a celebration the art of stillness. And it's just an invitation to think a bit deeper than you typically would potentially think. And it's just a focus on simplicity. It's all that it is. But I've found that, children are so full of joy, and I want this to feel like an invitation back to something that feels very primal and childlike and innocent, while not dismissing the pull of, enticement. I mean, it doesn't dismiss any of that truth, but it's just an invitation to refocus on the beauty and the art of stillness, which I think is underrated in grandiose ways.
Well, we have time for 2 more poems. Please favor us with 2 more.
Oh, good. Okay, let's see. And speaking of just being still, I'm going to read this piece called Hold. And it's honestly about holding someone. To hold someone in a sleep slows the hurried world. The care not to stir them, a sweet marveling, lifts eyes to what you hurried by. Clear focus dialed to the wren outside, her proud chest, puff whistle pipe. All that busyness blinds, stopping to hold spotlight's fragile, silent pencil. Woodpecker, fourth note deep, oblivious his sound pounds hammer to wood of coral bells. But the baby wakes and wants down. If you hold my attention, I give it like a tithe, you see, 10%. The other 90 is fantastically spent. Wise ones learn, hold, never be captive, but captivate. Hold steady, hold your tongue. Eyes of wisdom, hold me. And that was Hold. And the last piece, you said we had time for one more piece, Michael.
Yes, please.
Yeah, what time is the piece? Well, this is one of the last pieces, and this is actually the last piece in the work. And this, will be just a cathartic move back to what started this new vision for me, and that's my nest. And so this is called Still Life, and I am fascinated by the bowerbird. I don't know if you know anything about bowerbirds, but they have quite the habits of just art collection, and they'll choose a particular color, and I'm fascinated by their ways. So this is called Still Life. This bowerbird nest I rest in, 1 vintage green postal box, 2 emerald sages, 3 lime peacocks on tinsel ivy, all hang in still life pose. But not always so. Once fluttered with immediacy, eggshells, seashells, rattles and rails. When chirping ended, the kaleidoscope show and crowning prances, 1,000 little seed feasts to tip a nestled chorus, transformed into an emotional fall with no prophetic wings. The birds just bloomed. Green, breathtaking bowered years, a tower full of flapping, out on a limb, strands and strings of heels and hairpins, silver stitches, cocoa van, like the wild tearing tease of a wrapping paper. But tide pools swirl, the young birds gaze adrift on the cocktail bay. Bower boys strut, orange and gray, a new collection. Stronger lens arrange trinkets in woodland hay. When the bower nest emptied, sunset led me to another. I exhaled long and low with shiny eyes like my mother. while those grand strand birds warble throated culture hum dirges and morph into still life. Once space is shared, don't fear the end of a bowerbird show, but consider the price of a nest that's cold. Lost dreams alone will make you old. And that's the end, Michael.
Wow.
Lost dreams alone will make you old.
I like, you are incredible. Absolutely incredible. I have thoroughly enjoyed this hour with you. Your poetry is vivid, it's rich, it's deep, it's amazing. And I wish you nothing but the best. Wish you nothing
Michael,
but the best.
I wish only the same for you. I wish the same to you. Thank you for spending time with me. It was so nice of you.
A nest of stars, everybody. A nest of stars. So until next time, I'd like to wish all of you out there, be safe, be careful, take care, and as I state every week, let poetry ring. Good night to all of you. Good night, Nicole.
Good night.
You have just listened to the Quintessential Listening Poetry Online Radio Podcast with your host, Dr. Michael Anthony Ingram. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or Stitcher. And make sure to catch our next episode.